Reflective Podcast.
Blessings. Welcome back to another episode of the Fully Reflective Podcast. I'm sitting here today with a very beautiful, potent being, Ra. I want to just straight up get to the question of how that name came to you. But you're a coach, you're a nutritionist, you're a teacher, you're a student. Man, thanks for making the time, Ra. Welcome.
Yeah, most of that. For sure. Thank you, Rocco. I'll start with the name thing, because that is a question. It's a common question, and it's got a very simple answer. I was born Ronald, and I went by Ronnie most of my life. And I had an awesome life, but eventually it felt like that chapter ended. My own gyms, and I was wanting to shed that identity, and I was looking for a change. So I went back to Ronald, and it didn't feel right. So I got a spiritual name assigned to me, and the name that was assigned to me was Ravi Chander. And Ravi means essence of the sun. Chander means moon. And I was already spelling Ronald on Instagram, like RA_Nold. I don't know why, but Ronald. And I think it was mostly because I was a little bit obsessed with the sun. And Ravi it just wasn't hitting right either. And so I just decided to shorten all of those names, Ronald, Ronnie, Ravi. I just shortened it to Ra. And then the Ra of Earth is it's kind of how I feel true in the essence of a name, is that I'm essentially like a spectrum of light that is existing in the here and now as an earthling. And so that's where the Ra of Earth comes from. And the Ra just comes from shortening all the names that were given to me, essentially.
Beautiful. So a physical embodiment, kind of more terrestrial. I think I saw some almost look like modeling kind of aesthetic pictures. Did you do some modeling too?
A very, very long time ago. I don't know where you saw those pictures, but when I first moved to LA, like 16, 17 years ago, I did get into that world a little bit. Gotcha. I got out of it because it was the opposite side of the spectrum of what I was comfortable with. I'm more comfortable being a leader, and as a model and an actor, at least in the beginning stage that I was, you're being told what to do, who to be, how much to weigh, how to look. And it didn't really resonate with me at the time.
So the intention of this podcast, I went through a series of near-death experiences and a spiritual reclamation of my soul essence. And I have this testimony for a simplification of the Christos and the difference between Yeshua and Jesus, the difference between the Christ and the modern kind of Christian indoctrination of the Roman lore of Christianity. Psychedelics were a huge part of my kind of integration, paired with somatic therapy and psychotherapy. But I love integrating with others, and I see us as reflections, because we all have this different spiritual journey, but there's these aspects of it. The more you talk to people that have had a quote unquote spiritual experience or a remembrance of their divinity and their true essence, where they really come from, and in source and God, the divine, Brahma, however they described it. But there are these common denominators that I just keep seeing as across the spectrum. There's different things, but then there's the same thing across all these different people that have had spiritual experiences. Now, there happens to be a very phonetic mirrorship here. My given name is Rocco. My parents went to South Africa often, and I had some birthdays in South Africa when I was a kid, but they met a guy named Rocco Gioia. And that's where they got the name, Italian guy, but it was in South Africa. And then I found the Law of One, the teachings of Ra, around 2016, 2017. And I was already into non-duality, you know, had found like Vedantic stuff. I was in a Raja Yoga teacher training program. So I was like really interested in the higher psychedelic, basically spiritual metaphysical teachings that, you know, totally sober, and they were already, you know, Amrit dripping down inside. But curious, your relationship with Ra and the teachings of Ra, or the, you know, extraterrestrial identity complex called Ra, or if you have any kind of context with all that, do you have a relationship with the word Ra in that way?
I do. I don't feel like my name is that name though, right? Because the social memory complex that names himself Ra is spelled with a capital R and a capital A. And I don't spell my name that way. It's just, you know, capital R, lowercase a. And I feel like that is enough of a difference to make it apparent that I'm not claiming to be that Ra, even though that Ra claims to be me. You know what I mean? Like the law of one teaching essentially teaches us that all is one. And so from, let's just say his, because it's not really a his, but from the, I guess I'll just say the perspective of Ra, Ra is connected to us. And I do have a relationship. I did read those books 8 or 9 years ago. I forget a lot of the specifics. Obviously, I remember some of them, right? Because I'm talking about it. One thing that it really helped me understand was the stages of the densities. And yeah, that gave me a context. Maybe one of the first contexts of the meaning of this whole cycle of life that we're going through, because it explains the progression of where we came from, why we're here now in this third density, and what fourth density is, and what our ascension or evolutionary path towards fourth density, fifth density, sixth density looks like. And for me, that's all just laid out beautifully in that book. And it really, you know, you mentioned, I think you mentioned thread. No, was it a thread? Anyways, I in my own mind, I also use that word too. I think you did mention thread, but for me, it's not so much having a spiritual experience or an awakening, because I haven't really had anything like that happen to me in my life in a profound, you know, like spontaneous Kundalini awakening way. I haven't had a near-death experience. I have had experiences, but nothing like a near-death experience, right? But I do know tons of people who have, and I also have looked into many teachings like the Law of One, and I also have noticed reoccurring threads of wisdoms and state of beings that appear in every direction that I look. And those profound truths that show up somehow, well, they're in different ways in every avenue. Somehow they're massively different, but yet the same. And it's almost like it's hard to put into words, but the actual teachings puts it into words that make more sense than I can make at a human level. And most of all of these teachings come from multidimensional sources.
Yeah. Some good stuff in there. Number one, I want to ask you about psychedelics. Number two, I want to come back to your awareness of your karmic structure and your Akashic imprint. That's number two. Number one, have you interacted with any psychedelics that have given you a kind of crossover to the other side perspective, DMT, ayahuasca, or psilocybin, or anything like that?
So no ayahuasca, no DMT for me yet. I'm 40 now. by the time I was 30, I had zero psychedelic experience in my life, but I'd researched for about 5 years about psychedelics. And so by the time I hit 30, I was okay with just about everything. I definitely okay with MDMA, DMT, ayahuasca, cannabis, mushrooms, like the main 5.
What do you mean, okay?
Like I was accepting them as useful tools. However, I wasn't chasing them or, signing up for a retreat
Right.
to go experience them. But I had gotten to the point in my research where I've unprogrammed myself of the narrative that was taught to us about these compounds. And with all of that said, I've continued to research in the next 10 years after that, and I still haven't felt called to experience DMT or ayahuasca. I have had experiences with a few, like under 3 or 4 times, like under 3 times with mushrooms and LSD. And I have utilized cannabis for about 4 years back then. I don't anymore. Right now, I'm pretty clean. The thing that opened up, as you asked, which was the point, was when I had an experience with mushrooms and I already had a context of cannabis, I could feel how the different compounds are the essence of where they're coming from. So I could feel that I was not just interacting with the fungus, but becoming, like, it was like living through me, expressing through me. And then that gave me access to do what funguses do, which is interact with trees and plants. And I could feel that without planning to feel it, but I could feel it's something like love, but 100 times stronger, that I could feel towards plant life in the forest. And that gave me context that the compounds within these entheogens are doing the same thing that they do in nature, right? Like even like DMT is found throughout all of the forest, and it helps the forest build what are the equivalent to nerves in the forest floor. So to answer your question, I have a limited experience, nothing that's profoundly shifted my life. It's just that one little aspect though, where I could feel what it's like to be a plant.
Right.
That I think, actually, let me back up. That did change my life. I went from caring about some things to wanting to explore myself in a different manner, which is what I was talking about. I used to own gyms, and then I eventually stopped caring about that, and I wanted to go into a different direction. But I didn't keep on using.
When I hear a testimony like that, my physiology, psychology, biometrics, I feel it assimilate your consciousness into what I refer to as the Aquarian template. So I receive your I amness as a certain level of integration. I become aware of your vertical integration and your horizontal integration. I look at vertical as like spiritual experience or access, and then horizontal is our ability to be social. Some people are stuck social, some people are stuck spiritually, but that 90-degree angle, that right angle in between, those two planes is integration, which is what you said was one of the things we would like to anchor as the kind of template here for our discussion today. And I'm so called to that because, I met you digitally and then saw you in front of Erewhon, beautiful serendipitous Erewhon, for those who know the vortex that is the Erewhonian landscape. I see you, bro, as this awesome blueprint that I feel like is super relevant for young people that are interested in the experience of being a spiritually, call it realized, or a person able to access their spiritual experience. I would much recommend your template to somebody interested in their health and their well-being than somebody that's, you know, spouting these kind of clickbaity psychedelic ideas, because you're basically moving forward with real discernment, or at least that's how I hear you. I hear you grabbing and gripping the terrestrial with, you know, studied gnosis. You have some proximity to these concepts when you interact with the world, and you have that kind of, okay, I have some context for what this is. But then you don't get drunk in it. And I think that's super important, because a lot of people in their 20s, you know, the ego drops out of being a person, and then maybe it has a spiritual experience, and the ego just drops into another entitled complex to then get stuck in. So just want to say thank you for doing the work that got you to this place. And I guess we'll hold off on that other point, which was the Akashic record, your Akashic imprint. I don't know if you know what the word Nakshatra is?
No, I'm just going to shut my blinds really quick, but no, I haven't. And even your Akashic imprint question, you're speaking a different, I mean, I obviously am familiar with Akashic records, but I'm unfamiliar at the tone of which you're relaying this information.
Awesome. Maybe in some of the wording, but I feel like I love finding these places too, because I've nerded out and I've gone inward into this like study cave of all these esoteric concepts. And I kind of love finding that the boundary in between, like, yeah, I don't have context on that. I don't have context on that. Oh, I do have context on that. I love finding what those are. So good to know. But you do have context on Kriyas.
Mm-hmm.
So my initiation into Raja and Kriya Yoga ultimately led me to the path of Siddha. Are you familiar with Siddha?
Yeah. But so Kriya Yoga is different than what I'm doing.
How so?
We do Kriyas, but Kriya Yoga is kind of like a different lineage than what I'm familiar with. I'm mostly within the Kundalini Yoga lineage, which is it's supposed to combine Raj Yoga and all the different yogas. But I just want to state that when people say Kriya Yoga, I believe that's different than what I'm educated in.
I super appreciate that, to be honest. I've heard people with sounds like less education than you say, I do Kundalini Yoga. Oh, cool. What does that mean for you? Breath work and asanas, and it's kind of a westernized perspective complex that is just called Kundalini Yoga, which I have a funny, I would say it's like an icebreaker conversation starter is all it's meant to be. But I have a statement that I've found my complex say before, which is there's no such thing as Kundalini Yoga, because there's no such thing as yoga that isn't Kundalini Yoga. Mm-hmm. This is inspired from a teacher of mine that kind of poked me into a confidence that's super rooted in a humbled, tactile experience of like, I know Shakti. I just know Shakti because I've touched that. And I see you, and you've touched Kriya. But I love that you have a respect for lineage and a discerning kind of articulation ability to say, like, yeah, I may have even touched that, but I'm also ready to say, like, I don't come from a quote unquote designated restricted pathway of this quote unquote. But how would you describe, well, let's keep it more general, I suppose. What would you describe a Kriya as, especially as someone who identifies as not being a Kriya yogi? To a kind of common person, like what would you describe a Kriya as?
So I always start with Kriya means to do in Sanskrit. And essentially you are learning to practice your instrument, and the human technology is more than just the meat suit. And there's a way that we can tune our instrument and learn to play it much like somebody learns to play a guitar. And we can do that through Kriya. And we utilize techniques such as breath work, movement, meditation to give us a more full spectrum experience of ourself than we would regularly do in day-to-day life. And definitely Kundalini Yoga was brought here for the specific reason to help out Americans who have no concept of this stuff. So it's definitely watered down and westernized. And I have a business where I teach Kriyas, and they're 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm focusing on these people that I try not to even use words like mantra. I say chanting or talking. So I'm kind of in the superficial realm. That's how I work with Kriyas, getting people to relate to their body in a way that is just completely new to them as like a first step for the interested people eventually go beyond my current teachings of Kriya to find more established and in-depth teachers than what I'm offering.
Word. Beautifully said. This is so funny. I keep seeing the topic of that number 2. I said the Akashic template thing. I keep seeing it just going, it keeps getting like pushed because new things coming. And it's like, it's going to be a great entrance into that when we get to it. I don't think we're going to forget about it. But that all being said, that you just said about Kriya work, it has a super boots on the ground utility. I hear from you, and I know it does. But I also hear you kind of framing it in a way that's maybe the most accessible for the less initiated, if that makes sense. So it's like you're kind of pointing at like, well, how would a Kriya or how could pranayama or breath work or meditation or these esoteric concepts, principles, or practices help somebody on a daily basis have a better experience in their life across the spectrum. I think that's the point. That's
right.
That's Dharma in a nutshell, coming through a vesica like this. Did you find? So I'm interested in fulcrums. You know the word fulcrum?
Yeah.
I'm interested in fulcrums, really in everything. When I was a kid, I was like that, and then it just now in this context, it's like this. But so you had gyms. That sounds like an entrepreneurial like endeavor. Sounds like you were a motivated person, an inspired person, and also a relatively conscious person. Even gymnast is like physical well-being, highest level of physical well-being. If you're owning a gym, or you're going to the gym and like that, was there a fulcrum that led that inspired action and activity away from a more, call it physically based excellence into a metaphysical excellence? And if so, what was that fulcrum and when did it happen?
Amazing question. And just, it displays an amazing insight as well. So I actually went to school for psychology. And so I was mostly I started off being interested in non-physical aspects of the human experience. While I was going to school for psychology, I realized that I didn't want to be a social counselor, like a high school counselor, or I didn't want to do what I saw the other students in my psychology classes, what their sort of destination was. I was only really interested in what a doctorate in psychology and becoming a psychiatrist had. I was only interested in like that level. And so I realized that I needed another plan. And so rather than just bailing out of psychology school, I decided to finish my bachelor's, but then I tacked on a minor of exercise science as basically just like a backup plan. And because I liked exercise, I played hockey at the time. I was really into exercise. I was really into the physical aspect of life and brutally dominating other males on a competition floor as well. I was like the fighter. I was the guy who went out, and my job was to hurt the other team. So they were so afraid that they would be making mistakes when my other teammates, got aggressive with them. They would be remembering the last time I hurt them, and they would make mistakes. And we were very good because of me.
Wait, where did you grow up? Where is this? Where's geographically?
Michigan.
Whoa, I'm from Michigan.
Nice.
My whole family's from Detroit area. I was born in Jackson. You know Jackson?
Yeah. I was more closer to Detroit. I was like north of Detroit, maybe 30 minutes in Oakland County.
Wow.
Waterford. I went to OU. That's where I was, studying, like I'm talking about right now. And as I finished college, I moved to California because I was like, I'm going to open gyms. I was also very conscious back then. I was meditating at 19 years old. So that's 21 years ago. Going through college, meditating, self-development. I got very sick of what psychology was teaching me. I barely bought any books because I had to pay for my own college. So it was all student loans, and we used the student loans to pay for my hockey equipment and stuff. And so by we, I meant my brother and I did the same thing. So we were living together, and I wasn't buying psychology books, and I was coming home and I was pirating self-development books, and mostly having to do with like male-female interaction, dating, the stuff that you're interested in when you're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And anyways, I moved to California because I was studying all that stuff. I realized that I'm not going to be an employee. I've never had a full-time job in my life. And so I also had watched like Zeitgeist just came out in like early 2000s. I watched that. And so by the time I was graduating college, I already had like the mentality that I can create whatever I wanted. And I wanted a gym with ropes hanging from the ceiling, big open spaces, giant tractor tires, like a very functional place. So I ended up moving to California, and I figured that all out. I manifested it all to like to a greater degree than I could ever even dream of at the time when I was, early 20s. And I lived that existence. But in the background was still my love for psychology and my love for consciousness and my love for helping people. And the gym, just like psychology school got boring very fast, the gym also got boring very fast. Teaching people how to do push-ups, it wasn't stimulating enough. And I eventually was experimenting with all sorts of stuff within the physical realm, like working out with your eyes blindfolded, working out with different types of music. How does that affect people? Breath work, working out with lights off. And I was figuring out a bunch of stuff. I did very well in the sport of CrossFit, despite me being completely injured from hockey, despite me never really training as much as all the other competitors. But I had this other gnosis of things to help you within the gym. And I started transitioning out when I started realizing that our connection to the earth, the air, the sun, to spirit, to water, were giving me more power on a competition floor, in a physical competition than training in the gym. So there's all these videos of like Tai Chi masters getting their faces beat up by like MMA fighters, right? Because the Eastern philosophy feels like they can compete against the Western, like brutal force nature. And so YouTube's filled with like the MMA guys beating up these Tai Chi masters. However, I'm sure there's similar examples of that going the other way. They just don't get viral in America, because I was one of the people that I wasn't working out all day, and I was able to show up to a competition. I was basically top few hundred in the world every year for 6 years. I had 6 tears in both my labrums. I've got dead nerves in my body in multiple spots. I've got my feet are messed up. My knees are messed up. My back is messed up. My hips are messed up. My neck is messed up. But I could still show up on competition after not lifting a barbell all year long and beat 200 other guys that had been training from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep every single day for the last year. So
This was at the CrossFit Games.
I never went to the actual games, which are the world championships, but I always made it to the level before that. And, but that was still a high level, only a few, only like 50 people per region in the world go to that level. And then they take the top 3 out of them to go to the world championships. So anyways, I started realizing that I can train someone all year long and still beat them at the end of the year because I'm standing out in the sun barefoot. And this was before earthing was a thing. This was before breathwork was a thing. This was before ice baths was a thing. This is before being out in the sun was a thing. And I was just doing it because I was bored in downtown LA where my gyms were, and I was hanging out in Santa Monica Beach every moment that I could. And somehow I could feel that that was giving me more power than working out in the gym. And the reason why I wasn't working out in the gym is because I was injured. So it was kind of like an accident that I discovered how I could still attain power that was usable in a physical dimension because I just wasn't able to train physically because I would hurt myself. So I would accumulate all this power through the sun and the earth, and then I would just show up to competitions and hope that I don't get hurt. And I would do profoundly well. And it wasn't making sense to me. So I got disinterested in physical training, and I became more interested in like, what is going on with all of this? Like, what is going on? How is this possible? Can you really shapeshift reality? Is manifestation a real thing? I kind of already answered that on my own before that, but like, I just started getting interested in other questions. Like, can we really intend reality to formulate around us in a certain way? And I just became interested in experimenting with all of that. And so that's essentially the intention that allowed me to manifest an event where my gyms went out of business very quickly.
Wow.
So once that happened, then I was freed up to explore in those realms.
Fire. Fun. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for the linear articulation. Okay, I think it's time for the Akashic bubble.
All right, yeah, let's move on.
So you know the term Akash, or to a degree, Akashic or etheric.
Yeah.
And you've heard probably the Akashic records as a term, but you don't have any like interfacing with it personally.
Correct. Personally, no real experience.
Gotcha. Okay. So, okay. Well, then, quick context on Rocco Lenzing, which I did that as a kid. I was speaking third person. I remember in 3rd grade, I was in front of the class and talking about Rocco stuff, but as that, and the teacher was like, "Don't do that. It's weird." This gets into a sidebar about my theory and pretty elaborate thesis about what autism is and how it is an Akashic, etheric, light body, electromagnetic wobble that actually disorients social connection tissue in the psychology, which I would love to get into some stuff that feels like it's actually leading edge for both of us. And I kind of feel like I'm looking for what that is that would stretch both of our kind of vernacular reach, if you will. So, I grew up with this dude next to me as my dad, kind of the most legendary human I saw, living his dreams, getting paid to do what he would do not for free without being paid. So all of his hobbies he was getting paid for. Traveling the world. I went to a different school every year growing up. I went to Africa every other year as a kid, Europe every other summer. Grew up on tour buses and stuff like that. And then by the time I was like 21, my friend took his own life. I was in this rut of depression. I was already looking at like Carl Jung, doing like a dream journal, interested in introspection, but very psychologically based. No context for spirituality other than Jesus. And Jesus, I was pretty consistent to talk to. I would pray. And I had several experiences where I would be, I'd have emotions come up, and all I would know to do, my mom was pretty secure in saying, like, if you're ever going through anything, like, pray to God. And my access to God was Jesus Christ. And then I had two friends come and visit me in LA that were from Texas. And I had met this Muslim dude, and he was the coolest dude in the world. And hip hop wise, like, my favorite friend that I knew. And I was like, you guys, like, what do we even think about? Can I be friends with a Muslim? Like, how does that work? And they were like, well, we'll pray for him, but that's all we can do. And they said it with this tone that gave me the bad kind of chills. And I was really scared, actually, because I was like, whoa, I thought y'all were my friends. How do y'all talk about me? What if I chose some, whoa, what is this? What are y'all saying? You're saying he's going to hell when he's fucked, right? And we're like the better ones. They're like, well, there are only one chosen people in God's kingdom. Like, that just can't be. And I had a kind of fulcrum, if you will. And so I wanted to understand why certain people got certain cards and other people got different cards. My dad got these cards, and he was born in lower income in Detroit in 1948. And by the time he was like 15, he was like a savant playing the guitar and like won Battle of the Bands. And like, it's just not normal. So by the time I was 20, I was looking for my own spiritual understanding, but also wanting to understand what contributed to someone feeling like they weren't missing out on anything. The word FOMO really jumped out at me. These podcasts are super meant to engage in dialogue, but also I'm writing a book called Moon Theory: How to Miss Out on Nothing and Live Your Most Lit Life, how to remedy FOMO in the digital age. So for me, that's the definition of Christ, is actually the Christos. And the Christos is a prism, and it's a prismatic electromagnetic light body, which is the Merkaba. So your Merkabic structure is actually like a crystal. Mm-hmm. And the I am presence is moving from etheric non-existence planes through the Atma, the Jiva Atma specifically, through yogic perspective, didn't have that before. And it's moving into manifested world through one place and one place only. The opening. It's the snap and birth of light in literal physical reality. So the Christ, none get to the Father but through me, is a Christos. The Christos is a crystal. It's a prism. Light moves through it. Like the literal Dark Side of the Moon album cover. That's what happens. And then the chakras are the light body, like limbs. So for me, that's a little background. So a sidebar back to the other term. Nagshastra is a term in Jyotish yogic astrology that basically gives super tangible understanding as to why facial geometry has very specific shapes that it does in terms of elemental predisposition through your astrological body. So your light body, as well, so below. And see, like, I know you gather maybe 99% of what's moving through these words. Even maybe we have different kind of like lineage access, but it's going to get to a baton that I think we can jump both into. Thanks for your patience.
You're so elegant with those words you use.
Hey, thanks, bro. Man, thanks for saying that, because that's, to me, it's like I wanted to have conversations with the most spiritually aware people that I could find. And it's like, oh, it's a podcast. Oh, that's the format. Okay, whatever. I just want to like kind of share what I've become aware of. And shit, you might be like, whoa, stop. That's like false. Let me tell you some other shit. Maybe that happens. But I think exposing our internal in an expression of sincerity and authenticity and an interest to dialogue is excuse me, is unity consciousness. It's the desire to unify through understanding as union, atonement. So yeah, man, like I saw someone I didn't watch the event happen, but I've now had two people in my life who took their own lives, who were at one point or another, I consider them my best friend. And I was racking my brain. I was 22. My dad's a famous celebrity artist. I don't know, might as well be a rocket scientist. People would say, what do you think you are, a rock star? It's like, fuck, why is that a term? Why do people say that? It's like, there's like, they're saying it's not possible. I saw it. And then I see all this Illuminati cabal. I was 2012. I watched Zeitgeist, and I was on David Icke's thread of like, but I even at that point, even before I understood anything about vagus nervous system terminology, I saw, you know, the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra, and it, you know, the pineal gland, it maps the brain, and even the Kemetic Giza Plateau, the King's Chamber, and then, you know, Sirius. I saw all this stuff. I was like, what the fuck is going on, bro? Even before DMT, I was like, what is this? Which then I saw the DMT spirit molecule thing. But I was super, because my dad's like military vibes, and I would go around I'd literally see Marines and Navy SEALs, and he'd speak, man, and he don't have no, like, I did a shamanic Shipibo training program 6 months one time, and then I came back and I hadn't seen my dad in a long time, and he spoke at a veterans hospital in a burn ward, and there were these men who had like fought in Iraq with lost limbs, and one of them didn't have like lips and eyelids. And my dad just somehow has this ability to speak so confidently, passionately, and clearly and succinctly to the most precious topic at hand. And everyone's crying. And the warriors in him is like, he's telling my dad he listened to his song while going into the combat. And everyone's crying. And I'm watching him now with all this, you know, I've done psychedelics and I've done these trainings, and I'm watching, and I was like, that is a shaman. So again, just to reiterate, it came from a Rocco sincerity of wanting to understand, well, what's the difference between someone being depressed and wanting to leave their life because it's not worth staying in? FOMO, the feeling of missing out on everything, good life, good health, good mind, the version of me that I'd like to be, so much so that I'd rather not be. I want to understand the difference between that, the spectrum in between, and these people, these fountainheads, as Ayn Rand calls it, that are living their dream and seem to be God's faucet. Like, what is it? So I see you, or I see another Purium brother, Troy Casey, was just talking to him actually. And there's these people that are super activated and inspired. And you can get super heady with the spiritual stuff, which I think is where I got lost for a while. And it sounds like you were really interested in staying down to earth. And I think that's super helpful to the Akash now. You know the word dharma?
Yeah. It's your like path.
Your path, your worldly purpose, how you show up on a daily basis in terms of service to others. And your most seamless way to burn up karma, from my understanding. And karma is your allotted momentum of identity. And so where does that momentum of identity show up? Skeletal, neurological, brain, emotion, you know, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. And that shows up in the skeletal, the respiratory health. You got an issue with your knee, you got an issue with your heart, everything, your family, your grandma's this way, your dad's that way. You have a cousin with, you know, two big toes on his left foot. Everything is this mirror of something. And that's what I've really been attentive to. And so big baton moment. Even if you don't have a quote unquote Akashic record terminology, like deep background, the Jyotish yogic astrology thing, the Nagshatras, it literally is a map of facial geometry that says if you're born in this decan of the moon, so like every 30 days ish, the moon's in one star constellation. And so the first 10 days, the middle 10 days, and the third set of 10 days are a Nagshastra. This is my rough understanding. And if your moon is there, that's the first decan, but it's like the last part of the first decan. I think it's every 2.5 days, your moon will go into a different Nagshastra. So if like Rocco's moon is in Leo. Do you know where your moon is in your astrology?
I don't. My wife is into that a lot and she knows, but I always forget where my moon was when I was born.
It can be relevant, but it might also be slightly.
I mean, I can find out in 15 seconds.
Well, either way, you basically take that and then see in that window, is it the beginning of that window, middle, or end? And that's your nakshatra. But you can also look up your nakshatra online. But long story short, it implies your dharma, because your psychology is already primed to be a certain way. Some people are excavators, some people are teachers, some people are deliverers, some people are messengers, et cetera, et cetera. And I see that you've seen this as well, is that some people are kind of designed to be physically oriented. Some people are designed to be heady. A psychologist sitting there for 10, 15, 20 years of their life just talking to people about their emotions. Like, you got to have a very specific set of dispositions for that. So I guess I'll pass the baton just by saying the Akashic field is the etheric field. And this is where each soul, I look at it as it has a footprint in snow. And that snow is eternal. And everyone's light body leaves an electromagnetic stamp on the ether. Fire, water, wind, earth, water, fire, wind, and ether. The 5 elements. And the ether is where our Atma has a stamp in any iteration of it or any incarnation of it. And so I'm interested, a long baton, interested from your perspective, what have you noticed? It could obviously go anywhere with this, but what have you noticed on like a really boots on the ground perspective of what is the difference between people who have a soul, or the soul that they are is ready to become who they are designed to be or have the potential to be, and then there are folks that seemingly can't even get a grip on what they're supposed to do. There's such a spectrum, but that's, for me, the Akashic record talk isn't meant to just stay up in the head. It's meant to come down on a practical level. And I think it shows up in people realizing their dharma and realizing their types or their dispositions and stuff like that. But maybe as a many-fold question, like, does that all make sense to you? And if so, what have you noticed about that spectrum of people who are living their calling and then missing out on their calling?
Yeah, you reminded me of a lot of stuff that I've passed over and just not implemented to memory. So my moon sign, I don't know what it's called, is Virgo. I was going to say that I thought it was, but I just looked it up. And I am very, very analytical, which is a trait of being a Virgo, I believe. So what I've realized is that I spent 20 years of my life spinning around in a circle, trying to hurt people, trying to compete with people, utilizing lower vibrational energies as like my main motivator for action. And that allowed me to eventually arrive at my current state of being without having to have the distractions of all of the stuff that I was just going cycle. It was just like, hurt other people, be better than other people. I'd be in a room, every single room that I was in, from probably 0 to 25 years old, I was analyzing every single person in the room. And it was just a game. It was just like a movie in my head. Can I kill everybody in this room? If they all turned on me? It was like, if zombie apocalypse happened, would I have the ability to? And that was just like my mindset. And I was in that frame of reference. And now I don't have those thoughts. I don't get distracted by being angry at somebody yelling at me. I don't, and it's a blessing now. And so I look at, like you said, people that may be super ungrounded right now, and without disrespecting them, because we're all at a phase, we're all going through a progression of phases in this lifetime and in many lifetimes. And I see them as in a phase. And I don't know if that according to what I know, that phase is a very important place for them to be. It's as important as whatever I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And so with that comprehension, I try to not influence those people to be a different way. And that's just any type of person. I am currently acting as a mentor, as a teacher, as a, whatever, a vehicle of inspiration to those who are seeking it from somebody like me. I was at a place in my life where I would try to teach everybody how to be different. And now I realize that my lessons, I'm going through the lesson right now and in the last few years of letting people be as they are. And I'm gaining clarity and insight and evolution from noticing what comes up in me when other people are acting in a way that's disruptive to my harmonic, energetic field. And that's a challenge for me to be able to still gather myself rather than try to change them. And I feel like as I do this, hopefully, the world starts shifting in this manner as well, because there's a lot of finger pointing going on. I mean, if you open up Facebook, that's all you see is finger pointing. And so I'm currently trying to not finger point. However, with all of that said, I too am interested in what you were talking about. Like, what is the gap between FOMO and moon, theory, the missing out on nothing? That's an amazing thing, because I went through that whole thing. I was picked on my whole childhood. And so I had a similar, what makes people operate? And that's why I wanted to learn about psychology, because it was like, why are some people just bullies and some people aren't? And why are some people popular and some people don't have any friends? Why am I scared to talk? Why do I have social anxiety? Why am I shy? I didn't have answers for this. This is why I went looking into psychology. And I feel that alignment is one of the most important things that we all have responsibility to practice. Because if you want to be off the earth and on psychedelics every single weekend, great. If that's the path that you're on, it's the trouble where people maybe start to think suicidal thoughts. The trouble starts to happen within ourselves when we're out of alignment, when we actually desire, like we're thinking differently than we're acting, where we are desiring to be a certain way, but yet we're not acting in that way, or we're doing something and we don't feel good about it. And I would say the majority of people on this entire planet right now are out of alignment because they're going to a job that they don't like. I mean, you just Google how many people are unhappy with their jobs, and it's like 80%. And that's causing misalignment, which is going to ripple out in waves into every aspect of their life. And they're going to be interacting with other people and like you said, our highest state of Dharma, simply put, is where we're most passionate, where we feel most satisfied. And that's what inspires me when I am inviting somebody into action or mentoring somebody, is to find that place. Because if we can get people to that place where they're not only feeling and thinking in alignment to their actions, but they're able to attain the type of lifestyle that they're comfortable with. And I'm not talking about being wealthy. Not everybody even wants to be wealthy. A lot of people want to just be, sitting under a waterfall, and that doesn't necessarily take a lot of money, but we should be able to realize a lifestyle that we're passionate about in a way that allows us to do the third dimensional things like pay our bills, have a vehicle to go places that we want, be able to get on an airplane, be able to look at our bank account and it not be $80,000 in debt. Those things are destroying our power. And if we can get people in alignment and thriving, then we all start manifesting and creating a world that is more in alignment to our passions. And we start to live in everybody's dream world. And one more thing, a lot of people have a hard time considering this because what they're passionate about currently, there may be no way to make money, to translate that into money. And I say, that's up to you to figure out. We're going through huge transitions. Most of the jobs that we know of today are not going to be existing in 10 years. That's not a reason to be fearful that you're not going to have a job. This is an invitation for you to create the new, your new paradigm of career. And this is an invitation for all of us to step up and assure that we're no longer just going to an office and punching our keyboard, because AI is going to be able to do that for you. Like most everything's going to be automated where a lot of the employees aren't needed anymore, even things like teachers. So even me, I'm even thinking, what is the greatest expression of myself? Because knowledge is no longer valuable. It just isn't. We've got Google. Teachers may be valuable, but knowledge isn't. So what else, what is valuable to people? So that's where I'm interested in, is how do we align people to their passion in a way that is useful in this physical dimension? Because that's what we're here for.
Snaps all around. Man, you activated some shit just now. I had to start taking notes. Can I read some notes and then you just put like your hand up when you want me to stop? Because
sure.
So where do I start? Well, the ending paragraph says, the new earth is built by you being the new you, and the entrance ticket into the new you is a higher phase coherence of your star body embodiment, and the access to that is being in alignment with your evolutionary potential. It started when you were talking about phase. You kept saying the word phase. You're in a phase. We're in and out of phase. And I saw in my sight while you're speaking, the Drunvalo Melchizedek book, the teachings of the sacred ancient flower of life, the purple books,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the first time I ever saw the real distillation of the concept of the Merkaba. But that to me that's the 3D version of the Star of David. And that's the real esoteric meaning of the word Christ. It's a star. Why someone is famous is they're a star. Now they might get pimped by, draconian succubus beings, but that's another story. But when you're saying in and out of phase coherence is a sonic term, and it's an electromagnetic scientific term as well. And when someone is fasting, they're ending their intake, and it only adds a T, and the T is the cross. So you're basically phasing your cross, or you're phasing your soul body into your physical body faster, which faster implies speed and rhythm. Fast, speed, phase, different spelling, PHASE, but also F-A-S-E or F-A-S-T. In and outness, the rate in which a person integrates their celestial self with their psychological physical self is their phase rhythm, in and out oscillation template speed, or how fast their light body rhythmically integrates into their waking state self. How often does one's Atma integrate into their psychology or their Dharma? Their spiritual I am presence, spark, crystalline self is mapping into the clay of their terrestrial earth body and physical identity. And how well that melds is one's phase coherence. And I'm sure there's like a way to get like a ratio. Like people are really, I bet you could even break it down to like acidity. And people who have like real heavy mucus buildup and heavy acidity and misalignment physiologically have a very slow phase coherence. And I bet their psychology and emotional, that map of like the cone of emotions, like the lowest is like fear and guilt, and like the highest is like bliss, and that whole map of spiritual progression of emotional experience, super coherence with the in and outness of one's alignment with one's soul, which what we're talking about with the soul and the star body is your Christ body, which is your Merkaba. And the Merkaba is the star kind of template that is the real masculine aspect of the toroidal field. And the toroidal field is what is phasing. That is the encapsulating shape of what is phasing. Does that make sense?
Right, because you're going in and out.
You're going in and out, literally the loop.
At a frequency.
And how frequent you are in alignment with your soul body is your phase ratio. And whatever emotional level of pleasantness you're at, just put a number on that emotion, and that's your phase, or that's your phase coherence ratio with your star body.
And a lower frequency is interacting with that isness or truthness at a lesser amount than somebody who's at a higher frequency. And that's where people have a lot of questions about, what do you mean by frequency? Well, I mean, it's in the definition of what frequency actually is. It's the amount of time that you're in the state of truth or isness, or in alignment with reality.
Yeah. And you could break that down to saying, how often does one separate from source or their source? You can call it, how often does one spend how often does one spend time outside of God coherence or God alignment or spiritual alignment? And I also see some type of metaphor mirror here with like aerodynamics. I've always liked that with like physics, where physics and metaphysics seem to be like this like really appropriate mirror metaphor, but it's like the deeper understanding in Gnosis is like, it's not a metaphor, it's literal. It's displacement theory. Something is equal or greater to the amount of, like that's what alchemy is. Like you have to give something to get something. But also in aerodynamics, what you're talking about with how slow one's vibration is and how unpleasant one's emotions are, therefore, I look at this as drag, which, goodness gracious, I won't entertain the sidebar that I'm looking at right now in terms of drag.
That all makes sense, because most everything that we know of, that we speak about, is much more dynamic. It's much more dynamically happening within the multi-dimensional reality, right? Like even you mentioned the books, the Secret of the Ancient Flower of Life. They explain the way that he explains how the chakra systems are spiraling up the body. And that's the reason why we have like the anus and like one anus and like two testicles or two ovaries. And then it's spiraling like this way. And you got one belly button, and then he's got there's like two at the heart, and then it spirals back to horizontal. And then there's your nipples, and then it spirals back to this direction. And then there's one. Yeah. And
two nostrils, two eyes,
right. So it's like the depth of what's actually happening is, like, I think probably deeper than our brains on this level can really comprehend. And what you were just talking about, I was thinking about how we normally look at frequency, which is on a two-dimensional surface, right? And you've got the peaks and troughs, and you've got the line. If we think about reality or isness or truth is here, a higher frequency is going to interact with what is at a more frequent level, right? And a lower frequency is going to touch it at a less frequent level, but that's two-dimensional, right? I mean, we're up to like 12 or 13 dimensions that have been identified as, you know, like, well, or I8, or I don't know what's going on with the dimensions, but even if we just bring it to 3 or 4 dimensions, that's when we actually realize that it's not like this, it's actually like a toroid. And it's, you know, the infinite parts of us are going around, and it's going in and out. Yeah, it's got that wobble. So all the shapes, that those elemental shapes that we know of, are actually like, they're moving into infinite different shapes and spectrums of self. So like, I get what you're saying. Like, I can visualize it. I don't really have a complete grasp to be able to explain it, but it's wild when you think about what causes somebody to be a high frequency being who's just in just like solid alignment and living like you're explaining your father is, and somebody who might have the exact same talents, the exact same, you know, circumstances, who is in the back alley contemplating suicide.
Right. Yeah, the variables are many, the constants are very few. That's where I've been caused to place my attention, as it seems as though the kind of psychosis that can come from the early stages of a quote unquote spiritual experience, especially for someone in their young 20s, previous to their Saturn return, which I think is extremely critical in terms of all these factors. The psychosis that can come from putting too much of the awareness of what's happening into one's mind before their physiology experiences it causes that disassociation, or that dissociative identity, where you can think that it's kind of like dysfunctional law of attraction people, where they're like, which I definitely can say I felt that, where I am abundant. But like Abraham talks about, if you don't even believe you're abundant and you're saying a mantra, I'm abundant, you're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot with these mantras and affirmations. She says, you can't get to there from here. You have to find something that feels more true, that's closer to your current state of oscillation, which gets me back to that word drag. This is funny. I've never really looked at this before. So drag, wind current, like a sail, you know, but then someone says like, oh, you're such a drag, man. So you can create drag in your emotional body. And that's the power of contrast in terms of this upper perspective of how to utilize your negative experiences in a positive way. This is what Abraham and another law of attraction, not no woo-woo false light doctrine enough, but in terms of understanding how electromagnetics contributes to your alignment and your well-being on a daily basis. When we experience drag and in a low current, where we feel this pull of non-pleasant emotional or mental experiences, when we adhere to that, and we add cognitive awareness to the nature and the reason for those negative experiences, it actually can turn into torque. And I think there's probably some other words, physics words, that apply to this, but that's where new momentum can be started if redirected in a particular way. Does that make sense with like the drag and the sailboat kind of sail?
Yeah. I mean, it's pressure, stress, and friction is what will evoke those emotions within your current direction, which would cause drag in your current direction. And maybe the sail is pulling you in a different direction. And once you can get that aligned, now you're using that to, you know, fast forward, or like you said, increase momentum into some reality. And that's where it's like, who's in control of that? Is there another entity that's steering us to go certain ways and making us feel uh, let's say, anxious within our current circumstance to evoke emotion to elicit change. And if you don't change, that's where we get into maybe the reason for accidents happening that force change. And that's where we can, realize that everything's happening for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. The word adhere has so many. I've seen you have your videos on social where you etymologically break stuff down. I think that's so coded. I love that kind of content. We did a little bit with the word phase and stuff, but dang, what was the word we just pointed at?
You were saying, I forget. Adhere. You're talking about you. Adhere, torque. Adhere.
Well,
yeah.
Adhere. Torque is a fun one too, but add here. So you add here, meaning like navigationally, where are you? I'm here. But then also, how do you notice the information that's here by hearing it? So when we add here, we're in alignment with what's real or with what's now or with what's here. And if you don't add here, you're almost subtracting presence from what's most relevant. And I think like your testimony and others start being integrated, which I just want to simplify that terminology. Like anyone who has followed their spiritual vision quest, call it, or their spiritual awakening experience is an indigo crystal soul. Everyone's an indigo crystal soul, but more so in these modern past 30 or so years, especially since the 1980s, there's been all these documentations of people coming online with their spiritual abilities or psychic gifts, which ultimately are useless if they're not in service to others, which Ra speaks about a lot as the primary orientation requirement to move into progression. And atrophy is the opposite of progression. So, okay, this is a perfect segue into the other section of the notes. Alignment means practicing pointing your star body, which is your Christ body, into your social self, and implies Dharma, because Dharma has no purpose if it's not in service. And we all access service through social. Social is literally the mental agreement of reality with everybody else. And that means leaning in and embracing and embodying our karma, which the rate at which we do that is our phase coherence. Misalignment breeds negative psychology and negative materialization in the body. We desire to be a certain way, but don't act in accordance with it. That breeds sickness. Out of alignment with karmic evolutionary potential breeds depression and, again, sickness. And you said, how many people are unhappy with their jobs? It's like, man, what does that imply? But it implies that there's literally, that's that graphic I'm sure we've all seen. What's her name? Dolores Cannon. Oh, love her. So the new earth and the old earth are literally psycho-spiritual manifestations of a group of people and another group of people literally starting to materialize a certain style of consciousness while being in human bodies, living in the same agreed social reality. But there's these old ways and there's these new ways. And the new ways is the second coming, which really just means the next iteration of alignment spiritually on the material plane. So how many people are unhappy with their jobs? Mirror neurons that have only seen such from their parents and nearby karmic structure. You know, people stay in jobs they don't think they hate because for many reasons, but often because they don't know how to get out of it, or they haven't seen a blueprint or a template to give them permission for otherwise. It sounds like you saw really high performing beings, but you also started to witness dissonance in a level and a degree that you were too sensitive to bypass. And that caused you to get more nuanced in your focus and your implementation of your prowess. So mirror neurons, fascinating. I would say mirror neurons are how Christ consciousness manifests psychoneurologically. Maybe more on that soon. That's also a karmic structure manifestation. Indigo crystal soul calling is to initiate new karmic bandwidth. What a fun sentence. The indigo crystal soul calling is to initiate new karmic bandwidth. So like what you're talking about with, I don't know what your other family members are like, but if you just stayed in Michigan and didn't do anything with your life, it would have led to depression. If you just stayed in the gym, it would have led to depression. If you didn't follow those callings, it would have led to not just lower emotional bandwidth experience, but extended periods of time in those lower emotional bandwidths create a lower emotional identity. That emotion leads to mood, the mood leads to persona, the persona leads to a state, the state leads to whatever that whole graphic is. And that's the loop. Almost done. But that new evolutionary potential is the ending of atrophy. I heard you point at that as well. Feeling, thinking in alignment with our highest soul calling. And then to be able to maintain and sustain that, you pointed at that as well. That's super important too, because I think social media, especially as an era, kind of values peak experience and then non-sustainability. It's like, as long as you can share the highlight reel, you can go back to your normal fucked up life. But as long as you got something cool to share online. But I think the real cool stuff, or the stuff that has deep authenticity to it, is people who are sharing their real waking state. And it's not a facade. It's not like I did this one day, filmed it, and made it look like this is my everyday. It's like sustainable integration. I hear you talking about that.
I want to comment on the depression, because how you were saying, if you stay within a current circumstance, that's going to lead to sickness, illness, depression. And if you look at depression,
Etymological.
Yes. If you just look at the word depress, right? To push in, that means that you're weak, right? And expression is essentially the opposite of depression, because expression actually means press out. Like I don't know why I can't say that word right now. But the etymology of expression comes from to press out. So depression is to press in. Expression is to press out. And so literally the cure, or the polarity of, and depression is happening to inspire expression, right? And it is a signal. It is not a sickness. It's a signal for you to maybe search for that mirror neuron, right? To identify where to learn.
It's your cue.
Right.
I just wrote this while you're hitting that. Your cure is the cue you are.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get a sickness or a depression or a misalignment, it's a mirror in our face. And it says, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. It says, it ends here. Whatever that was. No more. Can't. And it's a cue. Funny word, cue. A cue can be a announcement of the arrival of an opportunity to act. Something like that. It's your cue. Like, hit your cue. That's your mark. I'm waiting on my cue. A time-based readiness moment, something. But then also a cue is a line that you stand in on way to something. So your cure is the cue, which is your moment and the line, your alignment that you are. So if we don't abide by or adhere to our cues, we're off cue, or we're out of time. And out of time is when you hear these young people. I love millennials. They're finding all these fun ways to talk about wellness in new terms I never heard about. I mean, I'm a millennial, but like, there's like younger people I'm seeing, and I'm like, whoa, I'm getting old. This term derealization?
I mean, I can put together what that means, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it.
No, I had never heard it either. This rapper named Logic talked about it, and then that was really all I heard. Then I saw it as a hashtag recently, and there's like young people who are talking about. I just followed a whole thread on. I just saw a TikTok and Instagram reel about it, and this is a young person talking about feeling like there's a plane of glass in between them and their life, and it feels like there's a lag in the internet connection that it causes them to feel this fog and this mental feeling that's like, is any of this even real? Which then causes this existential feeling of like, what's the point? And I was like, whoa, what a great kind of breakdown of it. It's almost like more accurate description of depression. I'm depressed is kind of this blanket statement that's maybe less easy to navigate. But that term of I'm not realized, I'm derealizing something, and this feeling that's like dread or terror or not super positive feelings associated with your realization, as opposed to the feeling of like, oh, I'm realizing this is great. It's like, no, I'm realizing something. This is not great, which I think is like the negative side of seeing the nature of the Maya physical world. But Q, wow, that all came from Q, which damn, I didn't even see that's the letter Q.
I actually consult with people, and a lot of people that come to me because they're depressed, it always has, like, I'm trying to think, like, when's the last time somebody said they were depressed and it not have to do with their life changing? It's like it's always like, hey, I was doing this thing and then this thing happened and now I can't do it anymore and I'm super depressed. And so they're not taking the cue. And that's I've never explained it in that way, but that's what I always fundamentally get to, is that this is an invitation, and trying to walk them through that journey to shift, because they're not taking the cue and they're just sitting and they're just wallowing and they're paralyzed and they're becoming, like you just said, disconnected from their current state, their current reality, and then becoming depressed.
If I were a muggle, how would you describe to me, take the cue from what to do what?
So from what is usually stated in their complaint. So the cue is the actual action that you're pointing to is causing the depression. And this could be something like, my mom died. You know, it could be my cat died. It could be I broke my back.
The unpleasant manifestation.
Right. And then the to do what is, that's the work. Let's look at this scenario. Let's take the negative attachment to what happened. Let's neutralize that. And there's a variety of techniques to do that. Let's neutralize that and see what's left over. Like, what is the gift in the scenario? It's great that there's a shadow side to it. We realize that. You're clear on that. What's the gift of this scenario? And can we take, like you said, what's the cue here? What can we make of this? Where can we go from here? And what I've realized is that I've met many people that took the cue. They've become paralyzed, and they're the happiest people I know. The people that something devastating happens to them, high functioning people, and they switch directions. And it's almost like they're in a state of bliss that was not even possible in their old way. And also, it seems like these people that are very easy to transition over, or maybe I shouldn't say easy, because I meet them once they've already done it. So maybe it was a long process for them, but the people that have been successful seem like they're elevated, and they'll tell you that they're happier now than before, even though before you wouldn't think that scenario could exist. But, you know, someone loses their legs and now they're telling you they're happier now than then. It's not necessarily because they don't have the legs anymore, but it's the realization that stopped them from going in a a non-meaningful life. And now they've found that cohesion. They found that alignment that it wasn't accessible to them before. And, you know, some people need that sort of nudge. And I think it's great when somebody just loses their job because the nudge wasn't that severe. Even though they might be in a financial hole and it might seem difficult, they're still going to have use of their body, and they're going to come out with a powerful story, and they're going to be better because of it. And so sometimes relating a story of somebody in the same situation or maybe even a worse situation can help people, inspire people to get back on track and get going in a different direction, because a lot of us are just attached at what we thought life was going to be like today, what we thought it was going to be like yesterday, today. And then today comes, it's different. And then we don't have the ability to reorient ourselves. But that's the whole purpose of life. That's what we're here for.
Fact. And if you're not in alignment with that purpose, it's non-living. I think that's where, depression can lead to self-harm, but self-harm ultimately can lead to, like, I call it manual ejection. You're just like, that isn't life. That's death. That's, you took life to which is a sad thing, but it seems to always inspire people when someone's been close to that. Which is what happened to me and others nearby. You see how fragile this thing is. It's so powerful and strong, but it's paradoxically so tender and so fragile. I have a mentor who talks about the importance of rock climbing for him. Been my acting coach since I was 19. And he's like, my teacher is the rocks. Because you go out there and you're immediately faced with the reality of your mortality. And I think when people have that kind of close encounter of the first kind, it can, like, bring you to the tangible reality that it's like, this thing's worth living. And if I don't live it, shit will get off the pot. If I don't live it, it's not going to work out. It's not going to live itself. I love this quote I've been seeing on the internet, but I don't know why I didn't see it before. Maybe it's new. The size of your unhappiness is equal to the difference, or something like equal to the gap. No, I got to get the quote right. Let's see.
I think it's actually.
You want to hit it?
It's
Let me try.
Happiness equals reality minus expectations.
Okay.
So if you have zero expectations, you will find happiness within reality. The more expectations you have, it subtracts away from your happiness. The more expectations you have within reality. So happiness equals reality minus expectations. Zero expectations, ultimate happiness.
Interesting, because that kind of rubs up against the, Neville Goddard kind of style of, like, you have to expect positive, energetic manifestation, and that's like a manifestation law of attraction tool. So it's kind of different, but I also hear it keeps you more neutral and naked in presence and less in the mind of any expectation. So that's cool. That's helpful to a certain bandwidth. But the one yours
started differently.
This one is the size of your unhappiness is equal to the gap between what you love doing and how much time you spend doing it.
Yeah, I think I've heard that one too. Yeah,
I love that one because it admits the negative first. Not that admitting positive stuff isn't helpful too, but admitting the negative, I think, is
there's a term for that.
It's visceral, positively negative. But yeah, it's like, I'll have it one more time. The size of your unhappiness is equal to the distance between what you love to do and how much time you spend doing it. And like, what a visual picture that is too. Here's what I love to do. Here's how much time I spend doing it. If I love to do something and I'm spending time doing it all the time, man, my unhappiness is actually pretty small. There's like not really much gap between what I love to do and how much time I'm doing every damn day. I love to do this thing, man. Like, I haven't done it since like last week, last month. But that was that one moment last year I did the thing I love. That's a lot of unhappiness. That makes so much visual, tangible, tactile sense to me. And there's the next note on something you said. When we're passionately adhering in accordance with our calling, it will cause disorientation to our previous pain body based identity.
Mm-hmm.
So when we adhere, when we acknowledge we're getting a call for evolution, it will discombobulate our ego, because our ego is structured on past events and future expectations. But when we acknowledge that call to evolve, it's going to cause a disorientation, a dissolution, the dissolving of our ego's foundation, wherever it was standing, turns to quicksand. And I think that's where the new earth is built, when someone adheres to that calling, which is the Christ all, that miracle, the mirror call. There's a section in this online course I built called the Mirror Alchemy Program, where it talks about listening to the miracle. You know, we use that word here and there, but it implies maybe the most grand thing that could occur possible. It's a miracle. And as a meditation, it's like, how would you feel if your greatest miracle fathomable was happening right now, or just happened? Okay.
Or infinitely happening. Yeah.
Or nonstop happening, right? Or in process, unendingly. Yeah, it would cause you to behave a new way. And that's that entrance ticket into your highest calling. I like calling it the high bliss timeline. Out of all the timelines we can imagine of ourselves, there's this one where we're in this pristine alignment. And it's the last chapter in Moon Theory, where you say, what would I be like if nothing was missing? What would I feel like if nothing was missing? What would my daily practice be if nothing was missing? What would my nutrition be like if nothing was missing? And if you answer these, check these boxes, it does require some discipline and some allowance. The masculine and feminine, this divine androgyny, coalesces into a 0 point field. And that 0 point is the Bindu Drishti, the Star of David Merkabah structure that calls you into this integral embodiment where you can't miss out, because you're the I am presence that's the only thing present. But it takes work to dissolve your future and to dissolve your past into this true alignment. And great segue, full circle. That's why I want to talk to you, because on the internet you glow, but then saw you in front of Area 1 that day, and I was like, well, that's bioluminescence if I ever saw it. So yeah, man, thanks for adhering and acknowledging and being in accord with that high call, man. It's a cool thing, and it's a gift. So thank you.
Thank you for receiving. I like what you were saying about the dissolving of the ego, the attachment to reality as it was. I like to talk about, acknowledge, have people become aware of, as we shift and phase direct in a different way of being, reality around you does dissolve, it breaks up, and the relationship we have to our current reality is very strong. It's in complete harmony with us. It's actually magnetized around us, and it's has entirely to do with who you were being, what you were vibrating at through your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And as we take the cue and we head in a different direction, it's going to feel like we're breaking up with everything that we've known. And that's hard to do. It's hard to process. You just think about having a relationship for 2 months and then breaking up. That can sometimes throw people into like a 6-month or 2-year spin that just interacts with everything. But if you're coming out of a way of being that you've been for your entire life and you are going in a different direction, there's going to be a lot in your reality that is not only going to feel bad when it breaks down, but it's going to be grabbing you back. It's going to be trying to magnetize you to it so that it can remain secured within a physical reality because it needs you there. And so there are going to be...
That's the science of addiction as well.
Right.
It's like an actual magnetic pull to a already established neural pathway or social pathway.
And I would say addiction is generally related to and talked about as like an external substance, but I definitely feel like we're all addicted to certain psychological programming and even certain ways of being, because it is stimulating the feel-good hormones within us. And we do need to be aware that we're addicted to who we are, and becoming somebody else is much like breaking an addiction. And there's that point where we're sort of in between two worlds with nothing securing us, and it can be scary for some. But it is liberating. It is like, you know, like how they say mothers change after going through childbirth, you know, going through that process. There's no guarantee. There's no sense of security. There most definitely may or may not be pain. Most definitely may or may not be. I just wanted to leave room for the orgasmic birthing people. Yeah. So I just wanted to acknowledge that reality does dissolve, and we're all addicted to our current reality because it's harmonized to who we are now. And if we want a different reality, if we are if we're intending with, you know, you said, you know, what is that highest state? I think you called it, was it high state reality?
High bliss timeline.
High bliss timeline. Like that version, asking yourself those questions, you know, what if nothing was missing? That reality is harmonized around a version of you who you aren't right now. You were just not that. Otherwise, it would be around you right now. So recognizing that your high bliss timeline, your high bliss reality, if it's not currently around you, it's because of you. And the only way to be there, like we look at everything as an electromagnetic field, you have to be in resonance with that timeline. And so, yes, you ask yourself those questions to figure out what it is, what does it look like? But in order to be there, you have to ask the questions of who am I to be, you know, in resonance with the version of me that's in resonance with this reality. And that's where we can start seriously digging and doing work and start, you know, even when you were saying like, what if nothing was missing? I was immediately thinking about like, what if every single memory that you had was fulfilling? You know, like people have these dark holes in their memories and they're just letting them be there. Like that same feeling of like, what if I looked at my living quarters and just like nothing was missing and everything was like perfectly as I wanted it? Do we have an ability to do that with our memories? Because that's where you actually start working on the non-physical, which is really the origin of the physical. We can't go into that timeline, you know, holding on to men are bad because my father treated me horribly. Like men exist in that timeline completely in harmony with you, which means you need to be in harmony with them. And I think it's fascinating. This is like, I was in the gym business working with physical health, and the non-physical aspects of ourselves are just so much more dynamic and so much more to work with. And it's just really exciting for me to be working in this field, working with people with their psychology and their consciousness, because it's number one, real, and it's amazing.
Big fuck yeah on that stream of consciousness. Man, you hit some nodes. And all of that, so it has to start within first in order for it to manifest outward. But it also starts as a mental process, could start as an emotional process too. You could feel the feeling, this thing that you want. Then you could see it. I think it's pretty rare for it to just show up and you had no glimmer of it. Maybe that happens for some folks.
And if it does happen and you don't like adhere to it fully, right, it's going to fall apart. I mean, it does happen sometimes. And then,
it's sustainable, as you say, to maintain that identity. And that can't happen without aligned action. And I don't think that can happen without some type of a principle-based discipline. And I think that's what it is to be a disciple, whether it's of a masculine pathway, a feminine pathway, or a non-dual pathway, which I would say is the idea is to neutralize the gender spectrum to get to the 0 point. Because when you're 0 point, it's also at the end of the book, Moon Theory. It's like, well, then what does all this lead to? We're real conscious creators that are not missing out, are on the leading edge of their evolutionary potential. And that requires clear mind, body, and soul, and emotion. Rapid adjustment ability, so very soluble detachment ability. Something falls away, not like gritting their teeth into resistance that it left. It's an acceptance, an immediate, what's your rate of, another term in the book is a refresh rate. What's your refresh rate?
Nice.
You can actually go into a program on the internet and see how fast your internet is able to process quantum cubic bits of, I think it is actually electromagnetic signal through the silicon that is transmitting all of these pixels, the light that we're seeing on these pixels, even this video right now. Our bandwidth connection on this Zoom call, this dialogue, is a great mirror metaphor for our bandwidth to be in alignment in phase coherence with our calling, and how often our reality glitches and how quickly we're able to adjust our internal mapping for the external mapping. I don't know what that term is called. Should probably figure it out. But it's how aligned you are. And it can be measured in that emotional spectrum. I think on a practical, real waking state level, it's how are you? Really good. What causes that? I'm in alignment. My internals really good. My externals pretty good. My psychology is not overly embellishing how good it is, and it's not underselling how good it is. I'm with it as it is. I'm slightly positively oriented, but not too positive so that it would cause a swing for when it might hit negative. I'm not overly stoic either, which I think stoicism is a fun path, especially for those who are more intellectually inclined. If you have an overactive mind, I think something like stoicism is a discipline to just, compress. You want to close the gaps on the horizontal, close the gaps on the vertical, and just everything. Earlier, you did the wavelength kind of thing. And my teacher talks about it as, somebody might need +7 to get to their 0 point. You might need -4 to get to your 0 point. So comparing our paths to anybody else's progress, and somebody might be super famous, making $1 million a month and doing their thing. And if we compare ourselves to where they are in our life right now, it would cause us to skew our current waking state progress. But in the grand scheme of things, they might be on their way actually out of that rhythm, or, they're still not even hitting, it's just different karmic structure. They're still hitting a different stride. And it might be a relevant mirror for us for inspiration. But if we overly compare someone else's pathway and someone else's posture and rhythm, it can disorient and create incongruity in our integrity. And I think that's a piece of the social media, a thin line between healthy and unhealthy use of social media. I know we're getting close on time, but one more baton just on that note, at least for right now, unless you got anything else. Did you notice a certain moment where you were like, I'm going to use social media to talk about Kriyas and metaphysics and also be playful and funny and use my identity and my persona and my ego in service of the highest. And so wellness and integration and okay, social media is a business card. Was there like a moment where you saw social media in a positive way and leaned in? How did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I took a while to act on it. I think I got my Instagram relatively late compared to like other people that were like, I own gyms in downtown LA. In theory, looking back, I got into Instagram later, maybe a couple years later than I should have. But I remember once YouTube started offering more than 10-minute long uploads, which started happening around like 2012 or 2013. Once I started realizing that, okay, now we can have hour-long videos on the internet. And I own gyms, which was a knowledge-based service. I realized that maybe this is going to replace a gym. And I got that cue and I didn't act on it for a long time. But it was at that point when I realized that, okay, phones are recording good enough video for people to process information. People are able to take music lessons online. People are going to be able to take yoga classes online. People are going to be able to do everything online because we can now upload more than 10 minutes. And it was at that point that I saw that the whole world is going to shift to begin receiving information from our devices. And I felt responsible to learn how to do that. And that took me, like you mentioned, an acting coach. Like I don't have an acting coach. I had to do this all on my own, and it wasn't easy. There was a time where I actually, as a homework assignment for myself, I made a different account and I posted a practice that people can do every single day. And I did that for 9. And my plan was to go to 360 days, but I think I made it to like 94 days. So then it just went from like 365 to like 100 days. And then I still didn't even make it to 100. But by that time, I taught myself how to look into a camera and how to speak and how to not be embarrassed. And so then I started doing that with my actual Raw of Earth account. I don't think it was called Raw of Earth, but I had a completely fitness following. That's why I started a separate account, because I could talk about non-fitness stuff. And through the process of learning how to just talk to the camera about more like meditative, consciousness, spiritual type topics, I then became comfortable shifting my audience over to this new version of myself. And I think at that time I had like 13,000 followers. And I would say 75, 80% of those people unfollowed me over the next couple years. I stayed at like 17,000. I think I barely went up for like 2 years because I think people were unfollowing me every day at the same amount that were following. But the audience started shifting. And now I'm at like 122 or 23. And most of it is aligned with this state of being. And I've learned a lot. I've learned the main thing is that I've learned to speak to the camera in a way that doesn't put me above the audience. And it allows me to resonate with people almost like I'm talking with them. Like I'm trying to reach people, not as me being a teacher, but I want people to be their own teachers. So I speak mostly with we language as opposed to you language. And when I do use you language, it's on purpose. But in the captions, it's all about like we. Even if I use you language in the video as like a shock, I'm relating with the audience. I've learned to not react to arguments and look at them, as you were mentioning earlier, as different perspective points, which is the whole point of this entire existence, is for Source to experience all of this from different perspective points. And so it's really difficult. It's a practice to not argue with somebody who's arguing with you. So I feel like a lot of people on social media feel like it's an argument. There's all these people with different perspectives, and people are going out arguing about, well, that perspective, yeah, but this is my perspective. And there's this force. And it's a really interesting practice to discuss with somebody in a respectful manner when they're 100% arguing with you. They actually do give some valuable information from the other side. There was a guy talking about glyphosate. Like, one of the things I do is sell Purium, and we remove glyphosate from people. What he does is he actually sells glyphosate to farmers, and he's arguing that it's non-toxic and that it doesn't, do all the horrible things that we say. And it was interesting to hear his reasons why. It was educational for me. And so social media is, for me as a creator, it's actually allowed me to grow as a person in my communication skills in a way that's going to allow me to be not only more receptive to people that I'm communicating with, but also more interactive and more be able to speak in resonance with larger amounts of people, because I wasn't going to be able to speak to thousands of people in person every single day. But that's essentially what I'm doing on social media. I have over 100,000 followers. This message, the goal is to reach as many of these people as possible in a way that resonates with them enough that they're going to then think to themselves, this resonates with me so much, it resonates with my friend also. I'm going to send it to my friend, because that's the only way that you grow on social media, is if people share your content. It's not people liking your content that matters. It's when people say, Johnny's going to love this, I'm going to send it to him. So now me as a creator, I have to formulate in 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 17 seconds. It's like, what would I normally say in 10 minutes? I need to channel it down to 90 seconds in a way that all different types of people are going to accept it, resonate with it enough that they then want to share it with somebody else, because it makes them look good to share it with somebody else. It's going to add value to them. It's going to make them look valuable to their friend because they shared me with their friend. And that's a lot to think about in terms of a message. I'm not just going out blabbling what I think is going to help people. There's a lot of engineering that goes into being somebody that, like hundreds of people follow me every single day and hundreds of people unfollow me. So there is sort of a revolver going on, and I need to make sure that the amount following me is more than the amount unfollowing me. And it's interesting, and it's dynamic, and it's exciting, and hopefully it's going to be adding to my life experience in whatever I'm going to be doing 20 years from now. I don't know what the world's going to look like, but I'm thinking that this is all going to be a valuable experience to me.
Man, at the rate that you're at, I think it's inevitable. Seems like you're doing a pretty good job, man. And that's all beautiful insight and profound simplification and compression of all the work that goes into like being valuable on social media and using social media as a dharma. So yeah, again, deep bow and thank you for adhering to that calling. I'm gonna do a little outro, but I got a prop. So 5-second deep breath in. Well, first off, it's been an amazing pleasure to dialogue with you and to digress with you and to unpack with you. So thanks for taking the time on this day to jump on here with me. I'm gonna give you a second to do a little outro and point folks where you'd like them to go. But I know you are a salesman, but ultimately a conduit for people to get to this product, Purium. This is the Power Shake, the berry flavor. I love it. Found it through Brother Troy Casey, certified health nut. And I'd heard my mom, she was, you know, a isogenics lady, kind of talking about that a lot. And I've had a positive experience with some of it, but just didn't feel a call to it, didn't feel a magnetic pull to it. A lot of it had some dairy in it, so I couldn't actually interact with it. And then found this Purium stuff, which sometimes I've seen some shellfish in a couple of the products, but overall, this Purium stuff seems to be really high vibrational, really good quality, feels really good in the system. You get a lot of nutrients in a little bit of effort. So shameless plug.
You're a brand partner with Purium?
No, but maybe I should be because I am a fan. And I could probably send some people their way. So maybe that's another conversation we have. But yeah, I just started using it because Troy was like, bro, you don't know about this? I'm gonna send you some vibes. And then now I've been buying Power Shake because I love it. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a network marketing, multi-level marketing company, and it's really a profession, and I'm aligned with it because of everything that we're talking about. It gives me a chance to work on my leadership skills because the product it's the Power Shake, it's the ultimate lifestyle transformation. The product helps people in amazing ways. It's guaranteed money back to help people. But what we do as a profession, like how we actually become professional at this is where most all my money comes from. I just mentioned, like, I have like programs for consulting and psychology. I just brought those online 2 weeks ago in 2023. All of our income comes from Purium, and we're not superfood salesmen. We're in the business of leadership development. And so we help people, we support people rather to build their own Purium business, and learning how to promote and sell the products is one little aspect. It's like what we do in the beginning. Eventually, though, we start to learn how to communicate, how to present, how to overcome objections, how to help other people set visions and support them to manifest them. And a lot of these visions have to do with helping other people through health with our products. And a lot more people need help setting intentions financially and achieving financial freedom, which is the term mostly used. But, we're actually never, ever going to be free of financial stress. It's just we don't have to worry about the bills. There's always going to be new goals in finances. So I don't necessarily think people should be intending on financial freedom, because being financial free means you have no money. That's how you become financially free. People with abundances of money, there's not freedom. Like there's still a healthy relationship with it, though. You're not free of it. So yeah, I mean, Purium's amazing. I just wanted to add to what you were saying.
Yeah. Well,
we call that liquid sunshine.
I love it, man. I love liquid sunshine. Feels like it gets me my greens in a glass, and I don't have to worry about a bunch of pills or nutritional supplements and stuff. So it feels good on me. That and Kachava. I would love a sponsorship from Kachava or a brand deal with Kachava.
Kachava does an amazing job marketing their website. I've looked at often to from a marketing standpoint, emulate what they do.
Yeah, sharp. Great marketing, great story. They're telling a really good story, and the nutrition is top level.
Have you looked at if they do affiliates? So a trick I learned is that you just scroll to the bottom of the website, and usually it'll,
look it up.
more often than not, all of these companies want people like you who have a link, and look at it says refer a friend, and then it's like give your friends $15 off their first order and get $15 for each successful referral. You literally could put that in the show notes of right here.
Wow.
And anybody wants $15 off, go to the show notes and get $15 off Kajava.
Whoa, boom, just did it. There it is. Marketing live. Man, thanks for that. And yeah, man, I'm gonna head out. I got a role in a play here in Waco, and I got rehearsal here in a little bit, so I'm gonna head out to that soon. Yo, it's been such a pleasure and a blessing. Thanks for, again, just making time and getting on here to dive in. Any last words or parting message, or you want to send people any particular place, website, IG, any of that stuff?
Just Raw of Earth, RA_of_Earth on Instagram is usually where most everything is, or my website's Raw of Earth with no underscores.com. But yeah, what's just one question for you. Your book, is that out? The Moon Theory?
No, not yet. I have an online course called Moon Alchemy Program, and that's kind of the interactive version of an online course about the same topic. But no, the book is finished. Got really blessed to link with this editor that just went through it and like simplified it and kind of cut, some of the noise out and tuned the signal a bit, and looking at some different options for like self-publishing and what goes into that. And then also, quick story short, when I was 19, I was depressed. I cried. I didn't know I didn't want to play basketball anymore. And I was scared about that because basketball was the only thing I wanted to do from 15 to 18. And all of a sudden I was 18. It was October 28th, 2008. And I was in Las Vegas, and I was literally on my knees, forearms and hands on the bed. And I was praying. I could see Las Vegas Boulevard outside of my window. And I'm just like, why don't I love this anymore? I was like, God, that scares me. What am I supposed to do? If you want me to do something else, just please show it to me and make it obvious and clear, and just take away from me what's not meant for me, and let me see that as well. Because I don't want to struggle like this. I don't want to be depressed like this. I want to love what I want. I want to love what I do, and I want to feel, and even at the articulation that I could access back then. The following 2 weeks, I failed a physical. I had written a short story. Somehow my mom sent it to an agent she knew. That agent wanted to meet with me, drove to LA, met the agent. They wanted to sign me. They paired me with a ghostwriter to write a treatment about my story, then met agents. The agent that stood out the most was the most clear and sincere. And she had worked with like Oprah's book club or something. So I was like super nervous going in. And we sat down as the agent, my mom, and this lady and her assistant, and she's sitting there in this office, and she's like, I've heard enough from these people that are telling me that you're cool and have something to say, but what about you? And I was just like, I feel like I have a story to tell, and I'd love to use my story to assist others. And she was just like, do you want me to be honest with me? Do you want me to be honest with you or fluff you up? And I was just like, I don't want anybody to fluff anything. And she was just like, I think you have a really potent story that's going to change a lot of people's lives, but I don't think you even know what chapter 1 is yet. I was just like, I kind of feel you. She was just like, I can tell they put together this for you and like helped you write this, but you're 19. You don't know what your book is. Like, I was like, yeah, I think you're right. She was just like, here's my card. Don't call me until you're ready, but do when you are. July of 2020, pandemic. 11 years later, basically, I called her and emailed, and she called me back, and we've been in coordination. So there's an agent.
Nice.
There's also self-publishing pathways, but I waited, man, and until I knew what I was supposed to say, and Spirit just kept telling me, "Stare at the moon until you know me." I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And then I saw the moon was this crazy DMT-like metaphor. Oh, the moon, you'd think it's making its own light, but that's just misunderstanding. There's sunlight coming from an unseen source. That's what the ego does. It thinks it produces its own light, but it's just misunderstanding. And when someone's missing out on nothing, they're in reflectivity of that source where the light comes from. And when they're feeling they're missing out, oftentimes they are in identification with being their own source, and they're disconnected from the real source. And that was my kind of unending non-dual near-death experience that just kept unraveling. And it's in a testimony and a real tactile blueprint for how to live your most lit life, your most bioluminescently inspired life, and miss out on nothing and remedy FOMO completely from your life.
I like that. And I tried figuring out what the word is where you learn from what not to do, because I like how you start with the negative, missing out, and then not doing that.
Right.
Because that's where people learn the easiest. It's like,
it's on the tip of my tongue now too. I know what you're talking about. It's a term for that.
Right. On how to learn by what not to do. Right. And I know that it's not exactly what you're saying, but it is, you are stating the negative. You have to acknowledge the negative to understand the positive. Right.
Which is
like the niyamas and the yamas, like the not to do comes first.
Right. Yes. Restrain yourself here. Once restrained and aligned in these parameters, now you can do these things. Yeah. Wow. Well said. And it's that quote during the middle or whenever it happened in this conversation. The size of your unhappiness, that's the first statement. The size of your unhappiness. And then you got people's like attention almost like, okay, what is this equation you're about to present? The size of your unhappiness is equal to the distance between what you love to do and the time you spend doing it. It's like, whoa. It's this, it's a koan of sort. You know the term koan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of. It's not necessarily like a poem or a riddle, but kind of bends the mind in this little, which I believe is a sutra. A sutra is a thread, in which you also said at some point. A thread is meant to sew you into attention.
Yeah. A thread does bring things together too. So it's like the 0 point of the two pieces of fabric.
That's it.
All right. Well, I learned a lot from you. I want to say that. And so definitely keep going. Your message matters, and congrats on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's been an 11, probably 13-year journey now, because you said it was 2020. So that's important for people to realize as well, is that it's not something that happens tomorrow. It might, but yeah.
It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen in the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I trust this will be one of many. So thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
For sure.
Yeah. Aho, ashe, namaste.
Namaste. Take care, Rocco.
Yes, sir. You too. Bless.